Hi, everyone. This is Raquel.
Hi, and this is Jennifer.
Welcome to Madness Cafe.
This is a feminist podcast where we talk about women's issues, politics, and health and wellness.
And where those issues intersect. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Madness Cafe. Today, joining Jennifer and myself is the very talented Nichole Willden. Nichole is an educator of 20 years. She is a writer and recently released her first book called Obedience, The Guild, Book 1. It was released on July 1st. So yes, and Jennifer and I have read it. It is really good. We'll get into that in a little bit. But more about Nichole. She is a poet, writer, and, as I said, author of the Guild series. A survivor of indoctrination and abuse, Nichole has spent decades writing fiction that sizzles with the themes of enslavement, hope, and resilience. And trust me, all of those are in Obedience, The Guild, Book 1. So everybody get into it. You have to read it. It's amazing. But anyway, we have here herself, Nichole Willden. Nichole, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I really appreciate this opportunity to talk to you guys about just all of the things,
It's so exciting. I stumbled across your work on TikTok. You came on and read something you wrote, and I was just blown away. I'm wondering kind of what is the background on that? And then would you read it for us?
Yeah, absolutely. It's called Trigger Warning. I used to be pro-life. The background is I used to be pro-life, and I believed a lot of things that at the time I thought were righteous and godly that I now in my later life have realized are just really destructive. And anyway, and so I sat down one day after Roe v. Wade nonsense going on in the States, and I just have been feeling this rage inside me for days and days and days. And I sat down and wrote this, and then just rage posted it, and then laid down on the floor for 3 hours, just so depressed that I couldn't even think. And when I got up, 10,000 people had viewed that video by that time.
Wow.
So it was overwhelming at the time because I mean, I have a TikTok because I'm an author, but that was unexpected. The thing that I like to say is I felt like I was screaming into the void, and then I realized that the void was screaming back. So thank you for hearing me in my rage.
You touched a nerve for sure, and it's a very powerful piece. So thank you for reading it for our listeners today.
I am happy to do that. I used to be pro-life, or at least that's what I called it. I thought I believed it out of love. I thought abortion is murder and believed my God above was proud. I wasn't loud. I was quiet in my condemnation of the crowd of sinners who use the left-wing media to push their gay agenda, trying to steal God from our country and constitution, trying to open closed borders to criminals, trying to take my rights away. I would say bad guys will still get guns, and we should not give assistance to the lazy. It's all hazy now. I used to sit in my pew and think, I won't let them brainwash me, as the words of pedophiles and hypocrites put me into a right-wing trance. I believed I was superior. I used to be pro-life without any life experience. I listened to hatred disguised as love. I had a hand placed over my mouth, a symbolic hand at first. I pledged allegiance to a flag which wanted to strangle me. Well, not me specifically. I was exactly what they wanted me to be. Innocently judgmental. I used to say reverse racism and manifest destiny. Yep, that was me. And then I got a lot smarter. I taught a class of tots whose life experience had been hard work, whose parents were not criminals, yet could be arrested for trying to better their life, one border hop at a time. I pushed kids into corners and shut off lights so we could practice giving white men their gun rights. I held a 12-year-old's hand while she claimed she was being stalked and wondered about abortion under her breath. A man who knew better wanted to place a hand over her mouth. I walked out of a church that had spent my life silencing me, telling me to be sweet, behave, be quiet when I needed to be brave. I lie in bed at night and cry for the child I used to be. the one who loved girls but refused to see how many women had betrayed me, white women who played me and told me my place was in the home. What home? America the free, the world power trying to steal all the power from me? My place is in the classroom, where those children need a pillar of certainty, where I can't possibly make ends meet, where my healthcare and mental health come secondary. Do you think after I dismantled all the systems of oppression in my life, after I was assaulted first by men and then by truth, that I would settle down and become some little man's wife? I used to be pro-life, but it was always a lie. It's pro-conformity, pro-capitalism, and pro-Christian white. I'm pro-choice now because I believe in real life.
Whew.
Wow.
It brought tears to my eyes again. Again, it's so good.
Thank you.
It's so
Thank
good.
you. Whew, a little emotional. Trying to read it again.
That's so powerful, Nichole.
How does the transformation like that happen? That's just, it's mind-blowing.
Yeah, it is. And that's part of why I wrote it, is because I was trying to understand it myself. I was trying to understand how I mean, fairly recently I identified as pro-life when I didn't really understand what it meant. And I didn't really understand what it meant to be either of those things. I just really focused in on babies and just got to save some babies. And now that I have come a long way, I realized that it was never about babies. And if it was, it would be handled in a really different way. I've been teaching in Title I. I taught in Title I for 9 years. If it was about babies, things would be handled differently in these really high poverty areas where these poor children deserve everything. They deserve all of the things and they don't get them. And I am a good teacher and I didn't last. I didn't last in Title I because it's exhausting and I burned out fast. 9 years. And there are people who do this and are in the what I would consider the trenches of education for much longer. Yeah. But it's when you're going away every single day, worried about children's lives and their safety, it's exhausting and it just gets overwhelming. So what I can say is how I got from pro-life to pro-choice largely rests with me being an educator, because I just could see it. I could see what is wrong in America is evident in the education system.
What is Title I for our listeners?
Title I is high poverty, where majority of kids are on free and reduced lunch. So basically we have a whole bunch of hungry kids who are hoarding food, taking food home to their families. And there are lots of reasons that happens. But what I can tell you, having worked in education and now I work in a higher poverty area, I can absolutely tell you that the low poverty areas are full of people who are not white. And, you know, the people of color are just in poverty, and they're stuck inside this education system where the gap gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger every day, every moment in education. And you cannot work hard enough to close that gap as a teacher, no matter who you are. And as I said, I'm a good teacher. And I walked into education just being like, yeah, I'm going to be able to turn this around. Couple of years, give me a couple of years, we got it. And then reality really sets in, and it's really hard to teach people who are hungry.
Oh, what are the roadblocks? What are the things that you were butting your head against every single day?
Legislation is what I'm butting my head against every single day. Like people don't care about education. They say they do, but they don't, because their vote's not with education. When we're fighting every single day to try and help overcome what are generational traumas, like what we need more mental health focus in school. And there's no money for that. Instead, what they're going to do is they're going to force us to give grades to kids who are struggling to understand basic mathematics, and they're going to say, you know, sit down, work with these kids who can't read, get them to read, and then give them a grade, when the hardest thing that some of these kids will do is come to school, feel safe, and cry. Like, the hardest thing that they're going to do is cry, and you shouldn't be graded for being a human. So it's just the constant need to test, when what these kids need is love and acceptance, is just, it's exhausting.
Right.
And unfortunately, it doesn't work, and teachers burn out.
Right. It's the underlying issues that are not being addressed, right? Like you said, like the mental health issues, food scarcity, safety at home or lack thereof,
Yes.
or, not enough money at home, or, what, and a multitude of things, or the adults that care for them working multiple jobs so that they can have food on the table, so there's nobody to help them with their homework.
Right. Well, I think what's hard is, I even mentioned in that trigger warning, I used to be pro-life. I mentioned that these are the hardest working people I've ever seen. And I was raised in a high demand religion. I was taught pretty actively that the people who are hopping over the border and are coming here to take our jobs away are lazy. They're lazy people. These are the hardest working people I've ever known. I had students who would come to school late or not come at all. And when I would finally get a hold of them and try and find out what was going on, they were babysitting their siblings because their parents were working 3 and 4 jobs. And that's an unfair expectation to put on a 10-year-old to raise their siblings. And yet they had to work 3 to 4 jobs to be able to make ends meet in this capitalistic hellhole that we live in, known as the United States. So
yeah.
So is capitalism the problem?
I would say yes, overwhelmingly. I would say capitalism is the problem. And I just barely learned in the last week or so, always growing, always learning. In the last week or so, I realized how damaging capitalism is on an internal level, because I didn't know that there was such a thing as internalized capitalism. But I can't let myself rest and just like read a book to save my life, because the time I'm sitting there, I'm like, but look at all this wasted time when I could be contributing to society.
Yeah, it's that whole hustle. If you aren't doing something that's making money or contributing to the rise of society, then you're wasting your time.
I mean, isn't that what school is for? Is to teach us to be productive members, to go out and make money. I mean, it's not really about teaching kids to think, right? It's about becoming a cog in the wheel.
Yeah, in a lot of other people's classrooms, it is about not learning to think. But in my classroom, we learn to think. So yeah, you're right. The way that it's set up is, it's not set up as a way to foster critical thinking. And fortunately, I do work in a district now where critical thinking is one of their leading tenets. I have always been a teacher who believed in critical thinking. And yet at that same time, there's a part of me who feels like I am betraying education because I moved to a school where kids are fed, and they come to school ready to learn. And I may feel this way forever, this guilt, like I left those kids behind who needed me most because of my mental health.
You're not the only one.
You're not.
There are droves of teachers that feel the same way you do. You can only do so much as one human.
I know, it's really sad. It's sad that, it's sad that the best teachers in the world, aren't getting what they deserve. In fact, a lot of times it's perceived that if you're working in Title I, you're not as good a teacher. And I am here to tell you, having worked in many sectors, I started in private school, having worked in many sectors, I am here to tell you, I have never seen more hardworking teachers than those that work in these low income, high poverty schools. So,
I'm interested in the critical thinking piece a little bit. How do you teach, or how did you teach your students to think critically?
Well, I have a lot of things. One thing that I did is really controversial, but I'm going to talk about it anyway. I was teaching sixth grade a few years ago, and I had a large population of children of color. And then I just have sprinkling of kids who look like me. One of the kids who looked like me just could not understand and got very, very frustrated with one of the other children in the class who was often in trouble. He got frustrated with this other young man and was just like, it's not that hard to follow the rules. Just do what you're told. Do what you're supposed to do. And I could not sleep that night when I thought about that conversation that I overheard when the other boy, who had worked harder than he ever had in his life to follow the rules, who had been raised as a problem child up through the system, who had been in trouble in every single class his entire life and had worked as hard as he could because he loved me. He worked as hard as he could. And he was very far behind in everything. And we worked so hard to get him just where he was supposed to be. He had never worked this hard. Whereas this other boy, who was white, had never had to work that hard. Things were able to come way easier because he wasn't fighting generational trauma, because his parents both went to college and have a higher degree, because he had the support at home that he needed when he didn't understand something. Whereas this other child didn't have those things. And he was the very first person in his entire family to get through sixth grade. Okay, he's a big deal. So I overhear this conversation and I cannot stop thinking about it. So the next day, without talking to my administration, I took all my kids into the gym and had them stand on a line.
Ooh.
Whew. And I was like, you do not ever have to step forward or step back. If something I say makes you uncomfortable, you absolutely do not have to participate. But here's what I'd like to do. I'm going to say some things, and if it sounds like you, take a step forward. And then I started saying things. I said, my parents graduated from high school, and some kids stepped forward. My parents finished elementary school, and they stepped forward. I don't have to worry about where my next meal is coming from. And they stepped forward. And by the time I was done with my questions, I had a bunch of kids crying. And I had 4 white kids standing at the front and a bunch of kids of color spread between there and the beginning line where some kids never took one step. And I said, in the race of life, you started ahead. I started ahead. You know, one of the things I said in that was, I don't have to worry about my parents being picked up by Border Patrol. I asked them to close their eyes, and I closed my eyes so that I couldn't see who stepped forward, but I already knew.
Of course.
You know, and if you spend your entire life being afraid you're going to lose the people that you love most at any moment, that's a big deal. And
that's trauma. That's trauma to children and adults, actually.
Absolutely. Anyway, so it was highly controversial because they're very young to be dealing with those kinds of realities. But the fact was they already were.
Yeah.
And that little boy who was like, it's not that hard to follow the rules, he was sobbing afterwards. And so we sat down and we processed and we were talking through it all. And he said, it's not fair. It's just not fair. And I'm like, say more things about that. And he's like, it's not fair that you have to work harder than I will ever have to work in my life. And I said, yep. And that was his journey into critical thinking.
Wow.
Validating to the other child. So
yeah,
right.
He recognized that I could see him. I see you.
I have to applaud you for doing that. First off, because you were like, I didn't check with the administration, I just did it. Because we all know that administrations are coming down really hard on teachers now for a variety of reasons and restricting the way that they can do things. But the fact that you did what you did, and so many teachers are overloaded, that you care so much about your students. And I dare say you probably still care about those kids who aren't in your class anymore. that you took the time to not only try to get them to see the bigger picture, but to see each other as humans and to understand somebody in another spot than them, and to realize that the world is a bigger place than just them. You took the time to truly care about those kids. You will have a lasting impact on those children. Not just the two kids who, were in the argument, shall we say, but all of those other kids, and then kids that they talk to about that, and their parents. You are having a rippling effect, and that's what teachers do. That is the great effect of teachers. My mom was an educator. She's retired now. She's been retired forever, but she, to her core, is an educator and will always be. She was the kind of educator that I hear that you are. So I, for one, thoroughly appreciate what you did. And I think that those kids are going to appreciate it. You may very well 20 years from now hear your name as you're like walking through the mall or walking in the grocery store, and one of your students who's now an adult is going to, or at that point an adult is going to come up to you and tell you, you made a huge difference in my life. Thank you so much for doing what you did.
Whew,
so
that's what I do.
I know you feel some sort of guilt that you aren't in the Title I schools anymore, but you have had an effect and you continue to do so.
Whew, thank you. I love my students more than life itself. So anything I can do to help people see people and human first, I will do that. And that is always my motto in my classroom, humans first. And that does mean sometimes academics get shelved because, if a kid comes in crying, then their humanity matters more than my math lesson. I do this every day. Humaning first is tiring. It is. It's tiring.
Yes.
And unfortunately, it doesn't pay as well as academics first, and it's not as easy to navigate. What I do know is relationships with students, strong working educational relationships with students will always work best. So that has been my experience, and everything I've ever seen and everything I've ever read and researched in my studies has shown me that seeing people as people first helps more. Even if your goal is to eventually turn them into machines, got to see them as people first.
It's not our goal.
No, not at all.
So I have a question for you. In your work, you describe indoctrination and abuse. What did indoctrination in your own life mean to you?
Well, I said I was raised in a high demand religion, but the way that my family lived this religion was very, very culty. And I was indoctrinated to believe a lot of things that I now have had to dismantle and in my religious deconstruction, which is a very long and painful process and is certainly not over. I was raised to be quiet and sweet. And I was raised that men are better. And I distinctly remember being disappointed that I was a girl over and over again, just being frustrated that I was a girl and I just didn't have the same, I don't know, at the time I believed like the same, like godliness or strength. And then on the same side, they were like, well, men need that. Men need that because women are already stronger in their hearts, which set me up to believe that deep inside I had some invisible magic that made me so super precious as long as I was being quiet. I was raised to believe that, and to believe that I had to look to people in authority to be able to know what to think and feel. I spent my life fighting with what I would consider to be my own values. As a young child, I was steeped in many different kinds of abuse. I was sexually abused starting from a very young age by leaders in my own church. I believed that they had a right to do whatever they did because they were my leaders. And I was taught to believe that they were godly and that this was what they did. And even though they told me that I wasn't allowed to tell anyone and I wasn't allowed to say anything, I believed that what I was doing, even though I felt filthy, felt like something was broken in me, I was led to believe that this was the right thing and that I had to do what they said because they were my leaders. So that's the indoctrination. And the very difficult path that it took through my life was when I did start to realize this is wrong and this is not okay, then it was turned around on me that I had seduced them, which is really horrifying when you understand how very, very young I was the very first time this happened to me. There's no way that a child is responsible for seducing an adult at any age, but certainly not as a toddler, which I was. So I was told to just be sweet, and be sweet meant be quiet and keep the countenance that one day my husband would be able to have a sweet, obedient wife. I really believed that's what I wanted.
Yes. Sorry. I'm making a little joke, a barfing face, but this is no joke. And I'm really sorry that happened to you.
Well, thank you. I feel like I've come a really long way. I did not find out that I was gay until after I left. And I left my religion because I was unhappy, not because I stopped believing in it. I was unhappy. I believed that I was suicidal. I did not know what was wrong. I left feeling like something else had to give. I had tried everything, nothing was working. And I was like, hey, well, my only option that's left is to just step away from this church in which I was feeling so much shame, pull away from it, see how I felt. And the further away I got, the better I felt. And boy, am I glad I got out before I figured out that I was gay, because that was transformational and really painful. And I dealt with internalized homophobia for several years while I dealt with that, just trying to escape from it all. I had someone close to me in my life tell me that the reason I thought I was gay is because I'd been assaulted by men. I didn't like men because I was assaulted by them, is what she told me.
Did you leave your church before you started teaching?
No. So I started teaching in preschool and loved it. Sat down with the kids for the first time. I did not think I liked kids because of trauma in my family and in my life. I raised my siblings. So I didn't think I liked kids because I'd already raised them and they were really super hard.
Especially when you yourself were probably a kid.
I was parentized. So yeah, I was like 10 and 11 years old. And so I sat down with preschoolers because I was desperate for a job and they were hiring, and they were like, just come sit down with them, see how you feel, which just so you know, not the best practice to put someone with kids who's never been around kids before and just be like, let's see how you feel. I would never do that now, but I sat down with them and I had the very first experience in my life of coming home. I didn't know what the feeling was at the time, but I was like, oh, this is where I'm meant to be. This is home. I was an awful teacher because I didn't understand kids or how their brains worked or anything, but I loved them. I loved them. And my love for them and my desire to be better for them led me into getting an education. And I put myself through school. I started in a certification program that I thought was a degree because I didn't have parents. So like I didn't have parents who did things. So I just was on my own trying to figure it out. And then when I moved out of state, my school didn't have reciprocity and I was made to start over. And I moved out of state to take a job in a private school, and they took my certification and allowed me to teach there. And I started teaching second grade in private school, in a Christian private school. While I was teaching in this Christian private school was when I started really deconstructing my religion. And it's also where I discovered that I was gay, and I knew I could not stay there because I knew if it got out, it would be the end of my job and it would be miserable. And while I did make some wonderful, wonderful friends there who are still my friends today, like among the parents, especially, who were just very supportive, overwhelmingly, they are glad that I am not there now that they know who I am. So, and then I was able to put myself through school and start in public school, which has been wonderful and very difficult.
That's quite a journey.
You mentioned that you went through a time period when you were suicidal. How did you get through that? Did you have to leave your family and religion to get through it, or did you?
So leaving my religion was a big part of it. and starting to recognize the toxicity in some of the people that I had in my life at the time. And it wasn't even about them. I want to be very clear. While they were toxic for me. I'm not saying they're toxic for everyone. I did not like who I was when I was with certain people. I didn't like who I was becoming. Just this like shame-filled, always second guessing everything I was saying sort of person. I didn't like that person. And all of that was happening at this time when I suddenly spiraled into suicide and just felt like I knew that if I didn't make a change, then I was going to do something very drastic. So I put myself into therapy, and getting into therapy, best thing that I did for myself. And I've been in therapy off and on, but now I've been in therapy for 5 years without ceasing. And just, that's one of the biggest keys to me going from being that person that I felt like I needed to put a trigger warning on to the person that I am today. Therapy was key to that, because they taught me, my therapist taught me how to feel my own feelings and recognize who I am and see my strength and see my worth outside of what capitalism requires from me. And so I just was able to do those things. And that's why now I'm in tune with my values, and I recognize respect as my religion, and I can just be the person that I am and recognize that everyone gets to have a choice of what happens to their body. Speaking as someone who had my choices taken away from me over and over and over again, everyone deserves the choice of what happens to their body. And everyone should have the option to have a painful conversation with just their medical team. This should not be in legislation. People who don't even understand where to find the clitoris and what a uterus is should definitely not be making decisions about my body.
Yes.
The end.
Yes. Yes. All the claps for that.
Thank you.
Fuck yeah.
Oh, it's so frustrating. I'm angry at my past self. I'm angry at that girl. I'm like, listen, this is not okay. It is not okay to go around spouting the idea of reverse racism. It's not a thing. I'm like, manifest destiny is disgusting. It's not a thing.
But you were taught it was a thing.
Yeah.
Yes, I was taught.
Yeah.
And I would dare say that your therapists would tell you your past self was doing the best that she could with what she had.
Yeah,
right?
She was.
So your therapists have told you that eventually you have to get to a point where you have to forgive your past self, right? Because she was doing the best she could with what she had, but she didn't stay that way.
I think your past self is a badass. Because one of the reasons we wanted to talk to you so badly is I don't know that we've ever met anyone who did the transformation that you did.
Yeah.
It's your whole life. It's your family, your religion, the people you're close to. It's everyone you know. And
it's
yet
huge.
Somewhere you knew, no. And you broke away from that. So your past self was a badass. She knew.
Thank you. When I posted that video and never expected any more than the, 200 views I usually would get, I don't know, somewhere around there. I never expected more than that. And when so many people responded, there was this immense feeling of peace and freedom that came with that, with how many, literally hundreds of people put in the comments, me too, this is my story. And I was like, see,
wow.
Here I was thinking I was just all alone and super special. And there are so many people out there. And I was like, yes, I love not being special. That is my most favorite thing. I love it. Like, please, more people, share your stories, talk about this, talk about how damaging it is to be told without being told outright, but being told over and over again that you are superior when you are literally not, when you are not special. Like, that's one of the biggest things that came out of me and my transformation is it's exhausting being expected to be the like one and only, or I was part of the one true church, and and it was exhausting being expected to stand on that pedestal. and it's not real. It's smoke and mirrors. It's fake, and so fake. And then it's just crimes being committed against children behind closed doors.
Yes, it is.
And I was a victim of that. And I'm certainly not the only one. I'm not even the only one in my own family.
Right.
So it's just, I don't know.
One of my kids asked me yesterday, so I'm glad you said that. She said to me, what does smoke and mirrors mean? What does the smoke and mirrors in your religion mean?
Smoke and mirrors, I believe the term itself comes from the circus, because they would use smoke to distract and mirrors to reflect things, and then they would make people disappear and do all these magical things that people thought were magic at the time. But really what the smoke and mirrors is distracting from the damage. They're constantly saying things like, we don't know yet about this, or we don't know, but we're going to trust God, or listen to your leaders. They're not going to lead you astray. Or, we come to them. I came to them. I went as high as they would let me go up through my church, talking to leaders before they shut me down, asking them, what do I do if I am gay? Because once I found out I was gay, I wanted to know. I was out. I hadn't been to church in a long time, but I wanted to know. And I went up. I'm like, you are teaching a theology that is 100% based on man and woman and the family they make together. So what about me? And they gave a lot of smoke and mirrors. They're like, oh, God knows all things, and man doesn't know all things. And we're walking around in this like cloud of razzle dazzle glitter they're trying to throw at me to make me feel special and better. But it didn't. By then I was beyond the ability for them to confuse me with their words and with their flawed doctrine. But that's what I would consider to be the smoke and mirrors. The things that they show a lot of, like, they're like, look at all this charity work we do. Meanwhile, they are hoarding multi-billions of dollars behind closed doors. So it's just, it's really gross. I'm like, and it's not charity when you're expected. The way to get to heaven is I was expected to give 10% of my income to the church. And if I didn't do that, then I wasn't worthy to take the steps that I needed to take that would allow me to go to heaven. So you had to buy your way into heaven. They don't want you to say it. They don't want you to say it that way, but that's what it is. You had to buy your way into heaven. Yeah. Which is icky.
Yeah. That is very icky. That's a good way to put it. Have you heard from anyone from your past, from your church or from your family, or anybody who's had any reaction to trigger warning or to your growth and your transformation, or where you are in your journey?
The only response that I have gotten from anyone from my past is somebody who said that they just don't recognize me now. And you know what I say? Woohoo! Good. Good. I hope I'm a very different person than that little girl forced to wear dresses. And don't get me wrong, I like a good dress, but forced to wear dresses that might as well have been made on the prairie, and forced to pray for the people who were abusing me. So I hope I'm a completely different person than that person. I believe that. So no, overwhelmingly, my family can't get me because I've gone no contact with most of them, with most of the toxic people in my life in general. If they did see it, I never heard anything. So, and I'm not sad.
Good, because it sounds like you are so very happy and so grounded and healthy, mentally and emotionally, all the things. It sounds like you're in a really good place. I think we all recognize that in religions, not just religions like yours that are very indoctrinating, but even in other religions, there's a sense of community to that. And the people who leave that sort of, they leave that community, right? So there's that emptiness or that void. How did you build new community for yourself?
Yeah, I lost everything. when I left. I lost
Mhm.
everyone. Building new community is one of the biggest and most difficult things about people leaving high demand religion. Now I've been able to find lots of community, but it took me a while. And the good news is people who are leaving that high demand religion now, come and find us on TikTok because there's a bunch of us. But for me, fortunately, I am a pretty social person and I make friends pretty easily. And I was able to find family along the way, which was kind of interesting. I started finding people as a teacher. I mentioned that when I was working at that private school, I met some parents there who I became very good friends with and I'm still friends with today. And then when I started in public school, I started making friends. And that's where I met my wife. She was the teacher in the room next door. And we had a room in between our two classrooms. In the evening, sometimes we would prop that door open and we would just talk. And she became my best friend while she was dating a man for a long, long time. And and then we moved in together just as roommates. And she was my best friend for years. And then after she and her significant other broke up, and we went through the hardest year of our lives collectively. Some pretty big things happened in my life at that time. And she broke up with somebody she'd been with for a decade. Then we spent every waking moment together. And at the end of the summer, on my day back to school, she told me that she had feelings for me. And we got married the following summer. And we just celebrated our 3-year anniversary. So I found my peace and my happiness and my family. She's everything to me. And then we got crazy and got a dog. So we're raising a puppy, and that is not easy.
So we should talk about your book.
Yeah, let's talk about obedience.
Yes, it was such a good book.
When did you become a writer?
I have been writing for all my life. It's how I've coped and survived through the ups and downs of the trauma of my life. I consider myself to have started being a writer when I was in the 4th grade, and I had a teacher recognize that I had a talent. She encouraged me to put a story into this contest, the school contest, and it won. And she was like, see, it won because you're a writer. I never forgot the day she told me I was a writer. I grew up believing that that was what I was meant to do. I was supposed to be a writer. But when I told the people who were supposed to love and encourage me the most that that's what I wanted to do, they told me, we live in capitalist hell, so get a job. No, they said, that's not practical and it's a hobby. And fuck that, because I'm gonna make a life of it. That's what I want to do when I grow up. I've been writing this story, Emma's story, for a long time, and there are many books, and I'm writing book 10 in this series. It's not going to be a short series. The people who are like, yeah, I really like trilogies. Sorry, I have a trilogy times 4.
Well, that's awesome, because my first question for you about the book is, when is number 2 coming out?
I'm currently in revisions. So
Okay,
Okay.
yeah, so that's happening. So like I said, the draft has already been written. It's been written for a long time. So
you need any proofreaders?
Yeah, seriously, send it. Yeah, we both will be proofreaders for it. I want to know more about the guild. I want to know what happens to Emma. I want to know all the things. All
thank
of it.
you. I love the guild. I wrote this story to heal myself, and I didn't know that that's what I was doing. But now that I'm aware of my ability to do that, I deliberately write things in to help me heal my inner child and deal with things. And so we have Emma, and she is trapped in a cult. The people who are her abusers are the people she loves most. And I feel like it's important to not beat around the bush around things like abuse. And the abuse that Emma suffers, some of the abuse Emma is suffering through, is not similar to the abuse that I experienced in my life, but the emotion behind the trauma of abuse is the same. And I deliberately put readers into the emotion of an abused person in this book. And it is a deeper abuse when the person you love the most is the one who's abusing you. That's what this story is about, is essentially Stockholm. So, so that's what it is. Deeply, deeply convoluted. And it, as you have mentioned, you need to know the rest of the story. You need to know what happens next, because I did certainly leave on a cliffhanger.
Yeah, you did.
We writers are jerks and we do that sort of thing.
What are some of the things, or maybe just one example of something that you wrote in there to heal yourself?
In this first book, one of the things that I did, and it makes me a little nervous to even talk about it, is Emma is a little homophobic. I don't address that. I don't clean that up in this book. And I am waiting for the first review that I get that's like, this writer is homophobic, because I'm not. But I was. And so I made it little, I made it small. She sees a man that's gay and she has kind of a negative reaction to him. And the guild has not taught her to hate gay people. The guild has gay people in it. Waylon's gay. He's a character in the book. And Thomas is bisexual. There's plenty, but she is straight and doesn't understand it and has not really had to be exposed to it because they're not very communicative, these people. So
No.
she spends most of her time with Monique, who's abusive and wonderful, but abusive. So I just made her a little bit homophobic, and then I deliberately dealt with that in the second book. So there's a few things like that I did, and I did that on purpose. And some people are going to put the book down and be furious when they're like, ew, this is homophobic. But I'm like, homophobia doesn't get healed in a day. That's one of the reasons that I wrote Emma's story the way that it is. I started her very young. I wrote these books for me. I started her very young, and she's growing up through the books, and there are things about her that grow up with her. And that's one of the hard things about the book, is that it's not an episode of a sitcom that gets cleaned up by the end, and she's a little bit homophobic in this book, and that doesn't get cleaned up until later on. She doesn't have to face that. There's no reason for her to face it in this book. But I needed to introduce it in this book so that when she does face it, we have some distance and some history in it. So there are things like that. Just also the feelings of abuse, dealing with the emotion of abuse. Those feelings are big. And burying them deep doesn't kill them off. So one of the best things I do for myself is I just let myself feel the really, really horrific feelings that come along with trauma, and I write through those. So that's one of the reasons that obedience was created. And then also just the theme itself of her having to be obedient at expense of what she feels and thinks for her own self. That was my lived experience, not to the degree that they do with Emma, where it's like her life's purpose is obedience. In some ways, my life's purpose was obedience. They just didn't say it straight out like that because they knew I would fight it. So,
well, in some ways, the female experience all across the world is obedience.
Yes. It is.
Yeah.
And we're not going to take that lion down. We're done. We're done. Yeah. We're not obedient anymore. Legislators, you got to figure this out, because I'm just here to tell you, Gen Z is coming. They're coming. And they're not going to take it. So I was a millennial and I took it, and I won't anymore, but I did for a long, long time. But Gen Z, they're too empathetic. They love people too much. They're coming. And I'm here for it. I'm here to help and do what I can. I'm here for the changes that I see coming. And I heard somewhere this week that empires fall every 250 years, and we're at 246. So
are you feeling hopeful, or are you feeling?
When I wrote Trigger Warning, I used to be pro-life. I felt hopeless, laid down on the floor, completely hopeless. When I got up and saw that there were so many people who were willing to fight this fight, it gave me hope. Every time I post and people respond, I see that I'm not alone in my need for change, in my desire for change. It fills me with hope. So even though sometimes it's frustrating and I'm just, how are we here? How is this real? How is this our life right now? It just, every time I get to that place, then I can find other like-minded people who are asking these same questions, and those people have more understanding and knowledge about how to make change. And as soon as I find those creators, I follow them, because I'm like, let's do this thing. Let's change the world. Thank you, TikTok, for getting all these people together. TikTok doesn't do a whole lot of things right, but one thing it does right is help people find other like-minded people.
The fight for equality and equity and choice and control over your own life, I mean, this fight in one way or another has been going on forever. So what do you do, Nichole, when it just gets to be too much with your own journey and your own healing when sitting with the pain is just, okay, that's a bit much, it's wearing me down, I need to step back and take a break. How do you console yourself or buttress yourself back up so that you can get back to it?
Writing is the largest part of my self-care. So when I feel overwhelmed with life, I just sit down and write whatever words come to mind. And sometimes it'll be characters, and sometimes it'll be a monologue about the craziness of going from being pro-life to pro-choice. And sometimes it'll just be rage that comes out in splintered words on a page. But that writing is my best form of self-care. But also, I don't sit alone with my feelings anymore. I don't believe in sitting alone with your feelings anymore. And that doesn't mean I go and traumatize other people with them, but I let other people know. I tell my wife, I'm feeling big feelings, because when I was a child and I felt big feelings, I was told to be quiet and suck it up. So now when I feel big feelings, I go to the people I trust most, and that is usually my wife, and I tell her I'm feeling big feelings, and we feel those big feelings together. And I give myself the love and the grace and the compassion that I wasn't given as a child. I sit and I can say to myself, yeah, these are big feelings. These are scary feelings. I'm afraid I'm going to lose my freedom. I'm afraid I'm going to lose my wife because of legislation, and I can sit with that and be like, yeah, these are big feelings, but I don't do it alone anymore. We sit together and we feel the feelings together now.
Oh my God, that's awesome. Couple goals.
I know that I can't always share what the big feelings are about, because like I said, I'm not going to traumatize other people. I feel like one of the things that we do wrong in the world is sit quietly with our own feelings. That's what we do wrong. And that's what white people have been doing wrong for generations, because we were taught to be quiet and sit still and put on your good quiet face when you're facing people. And we don't go find community, we go to solitude. And that causes a whole lot of suicide. That's what happens, because you can't deal with your emotions on your own and you don't know what to do. And I'm here saying, no, find a community, find people. And if you are with people who cannot sit with you when you are in your hardest emotions, then those are not your people. Find your people.
I have one more big question for you.
Okay.
After everything you've been through, do you still believe in God? And if so, who is God to you?
I don't adhere to a deity now. I consider myself to be atheist. However, I believe deeply in people, particularly these amazing children that I have the honor of being an instructor for a short time in their life. I believe in people, and I believe that respectful people can do amazing things. I see it every day. And so, no, I don't believe in God, because I don't think we need a God. I think we are enough without one, and we have each other, and that's enough. That's enough for me.
Great answer.
Wow.
Thank you.
Wow.
Thank you.
Man,
thank you so much for letting me come on here and share a little bit of my story and my journey, because it's been years. It's been years of pain and trial to come to this place of what I would consider wholeness or peace. So
do you, and I want to phrase this the right way. Do you think what's coming from your pain now is worth it? Do you know what I mean? I mean, I don't want to say that the pain was necessary in any way, but do you feel that there's this good thing that has come out of it?
Yeah, I mean, I believe I wrote a poem a long time ago called Torture the Artist, and it was just kind of a cheeky, ridiculous, like, well, if art is built through pain, then I guess we should be torturing people, just like teasing and ridiculous.
Yeah.
I don't actually believe that. But I do believe that pain begots beauty. Yes, because I went through the horrendous things that happened to me in my life, I was able to dig my way out, and I did it in a beautiful way through, writing and teaching. Do I believe it was necessary for me to go through that pain to be the person I am today? No, absolutely not. I chose to do good things with the pain that happened to me. And I hope that other people who have experienced similar pains will make the choice to do good for themselves and for their community. I don't think anything's worth the agony of repetitive childhood trauma. I hope everyone who has it can find their way out and can put beautiful things out in the world. And that is why I don't shy away from things like abuse, because it's real. And pretending it's not real is a privilege, a privilege of the people who don't experience it. So
I feel like what you've gone through and your journey has given you a greater sense of empathy. You're using your powers for good.
I certainly hope so. Empathy's been my crowning jewel all my life. I believe I have always wanted to understand where other people were coming from, so much so that it's held up my healing journey many times when I would not let myself get enraged at the people who harmed me, because I was so desperately trying to understand where they came from. And so much so now that I don't believe in the idea of good people and bad people. I don't believe that there are bad people. I believe there are traumatized people. I believe there are people who do good things with their pain and people who do harmful things with their pain. That's been a big thing because I was raised to believe that there was good people and bad people. And if I wanted to be a good people, I had to stay away from the bad people. And now I don't believe that. I don't believe that. I believe there are humans living a human experience, and that is difficult for everyone.
Yeah.
Wow, that's huge. I don't know if I'm there.
That's okay. It took me a long time.
I think my definition of good people and bad people is different from what you were raised with. I still have that dichotomy in my head of good people and bad people. I mean, it's not the only way that I see people, I mean, I do believe also that hurt people. People like Donald Trump and Mitch McConnell are the bad people.
I think Donald Trump is probably one of the most wounded people I've ever seen. You can see it all over his face.
Yeah.
I think he's choosing to do bad things.
Of course he is.
Yeah.
And I think he knows what he's doing is bad.
Of course he does.
Which is really sad. It's sad to be doing something is harmful and then continue to do it. And I think you can't live among the elite if you are not willing to be that ruthless. You really can't.
Agreed.
Because you can't be a multi-billionaire and then walk through the streets of the people who are suffering and not recognize that you could help if you chose to, and you're choosing not to.
Watch other human beings starve when you I don't know how you can do that without recognizing what you're doing is harmful. While I do continue to live within my shades of gray, because I absolutely don't believe in the kind of black and white, good and bad mentality. That's what makes obedience and indeed the guild so powerful, is it is written within shades of gray. That's the point of it. It's not easy to come down on what side it is when you're going through this series and you're like, yeah, I hate him. He's a really bad person. And then in the next scene, I write it so you love him. I did that on purpose because I wanted people to experience the shades of gray. And that's what I do. Beautiful.
Well, you did a fantastic job of it. This was such a good book. It is so well written. I literally was on the edge of my seat. Like the last 3 chapters, I was just
I just reread it and I did the same thing, and I even knew what happened, and I was still on the edge of my seat.
Like, I can't wait to find out more about the guild, like not just where it goes in the future, but I want to know the history of the guild. Like I want a prequel. I want sequels.
She's got 10 books. We're gonna
know
a lot.
And when I'm done, there will be 12.
Wow.
As there should be.
Yeah, there will be 12. So I've had some people who've asked me, because some people have read book 1, and once you finish book 1, people are like, okay, I get it. There will be 12 because she's in obedience, and next she'll be in diligence. And book 2 is Diligence, the Guild book 2. We are really hoping to get it out later this year. We'll see how it goes.
Thank you so much, Nichole, for being with us and sharing
all
about your journey and the book and your growth and all of it. And thank you for putting it all out there.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me and letting me share my story. I really appreciate it.
Take care. That
was amazing.
That was so, so, so good. I'm always so amazed with people and blown away by people who are so willing to share their stories with us.
Mm-hmm.
Because those are not easy stories to tell. You and I say all the time, get the things out of the dark, like put them out there, share the things. That takes the power away from it.
Now that you said that, I think there's even a step further, because we've been talking about that for over a year now. Get it out, put it into the light. It sets you free in some regard. But what I'm hearing from Nichole is it also allows you to build your true community. As she said, she thought she was screaming her rage into the void. And then the void responded to her with her community, with all of us who are screaming our rage right back or right out into the same void. And it makes us know that we're not alone.
Yeah.
We're not alone.
Yeah, we are not alone. We are not the only ones feeling any of the things that we're feeling at all.
And also her story of childhood sexual abuse.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God, it brought me to tears again, because I have just recently started talking about my own childhood sexual abuse. One of the things she talked about was her community blaming her as a toddler for being sexual. She's not sexual, she was sexualized. Yeah. And I had the same thing happen in my house. I had brought up that maybe my sister had been molested by a step parent, and my mom said, "Oh, I know. That's why I had to get you out of the house, because you were such a sexual little child that I was afraid for you." I was a toddler. I was not sexual. Yeah, my mom said that to me. And I didn't know anything about myself at the time. I only knew about what my sister had told me about the fact that my stepfather had hit on her. And so I asked my mom, and my mom said, yes. When she told me, I believed her. And good credit to my mom on that part, that she believed my sister, because a lot of moms don't.
Right.
But then she also said, I was fearful for you because you were such a sexual young girl. I was not sexual. I was obviously now being sexualized. I was free. I was a free feeling.
Yeah. You were a kid.
I was a kid. Yeah. So I really appreciate her saying that, because her voice helps me to give my voice, helps others to hear voice. We are not alone. It's some statistic like 8 out of 10 women. So it's someone you know, right?
Yeah.
But we didn't talk a whole lot about the book, as much as we should have. So I just want to say before we finish that when I picked this book up, I could not put it down. I seriously read it in like 3 days. And my kids were kind of laughing at me because, usually it's them, but I was. And I just can't wait for the next one to come out. That was my first question, is when do I get the next one? Yeah. And now that I know that there's 12, I suppose we're going to be in this relationship for years to come.
Yes, we are. It is so good, and it's so tightly written, and there's so much detail. It's called Obedience, the Guild Book 1. Y'all read this book. Read it. It is so good.
Bye, Raquel.
Bye, Jennifer. Thanks, everyone, for listening today. We will be back with more Madness Cafe next week. You can find us on Instagram at Madness Cafe Podcast, or email us at madnesscafepodcast@gmail.com. Bye.